We'll start straight away. Right, we shall begin. Welcome. I reiterate what has been said by the Minister during the keynote address just now. Being a maritime nation with our huge maritime zones, the need for ocean governance regime, especially for Malaysia, is nothing new. Ever since we became a party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and also when we ratified on 14 October 1996. The overarching policy would certainly encompass various maritime aspects, from security to safety to economy and also environments. So with all these multifaceted issues that we are facing, enforcing maritime laws and regulations, for instance, require great deals of cooperation and coordination, of course. Within the Malaysia Maritime Domain alone, as also mentioned and reflected by the keynote just now, we have to deal with more than 10 ministries and 31 maritime-related agencies. Hence, how do we progress so far in terms of integration and also in adapting to whatever growing challenges and also the dynamics of maintaining good order at sea. So against this backdrop, we are very fortunate this morning. Today with me, we have three invited panelists who are the subject matter experts, which will delve into this topic. Allow me to briefly introduce them to you. Our first panel speaker on my far left is Dr. Abdul Rashid bin Abdul Hamid, who is currently the Principal Assistant Director, Maritime Security and Sovereignty Division, National Security Council. Welcome, Doctor. Good to see you. And our second panel speaker on my left is Professor Stuart Kay, who is currently the Director and Professor of Law of the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security, University of Wollongong. Glad to have you today, Prof. Welcome to the Lima or Langkawi Maritime Conference. And our third panel speaker is Dr. Tarashini Krishnan on my right. She is the Senior Lecturer at the Department of Strategic Studies, Faculty of Defence Studies and Management, National Defence University of Malaysia. How are you, Doctor? And welcome to this conference. So let's not waste our precious time. Each panel speaker is given about 10 minutes to deliver your perspective. I will remind you probably at the end of the timing. And without further ado, may I now call upon Dr. Rashid to deliver your perspective, please. The floor is yours.
Excellency and distinguished guests, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer, the Royal Malaysian Navy, for the invitation to NSC to become one of the panelists in this session. After 4 years, now we are back in Langkawi for Langkawi International Maritime and Airspace Lima. This is the first Lima hosted by Malaysia after the pandemic era. NSC value this event as a very significant and important event, taking into account that the involvement of maritime security issues as well as airspace issues has grown for the past few years. I would like also to take this opportunity to clarify that I'm actually is a last-minute appointed speaker for this session, due to the fact that Mr. Muhammad Helmi bin Ahmad, the original speaker for this session, cannot proceed with his task because of the Lois Force tragedy. He lost his voice, almost totally lost his voice since yesterday. I don't know what he drank and or he ate. And I've been asked to replace him. So, ladies and gentlemen, here I am, standing in front of you. And we hope that Mr. Muhammad Helmi bin Ahmad will recover soon. Next slide. Excellency and distinguished guests, in this session, we are going to talk and discuss about the underpinning the ocean governance. For my presentation, which may take around 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about the underpinning ocean governance from the National Security Council or NSC perspective. Ocean governance is very crucial and vital because it relating to the way on how we manage the ocean and also its resources in the best way. When we talk about ocean governance, it actually touches on a very big scope or concept. Ocean governance not only laid down the responsibility of a coastal state like Malaysia, Indonesia, China, Australia, etc., but it may involve a landlocked state which has some interest with ocean or maritime affairs. The concept of ocean governance involves element of policy by the countries, the legal framework which may be resulted from the international convention or circular, for instance, United Nations, International Maritime Organization, etc., and also the domestic legal or legislation framework of countries. It may not only involve state actors, which is the government, but it also the collective responsible of non-state actors such as trader, community, and etc. All parties have their own responsibility to manage and be part of ocean governance. Environment, transport, or safety of navigation and act of enforcement are some of the important elements under the ocean governance. More crucially, ocean governance also relates to territorial dispute of some segment of ocean among the state actors. This issue of territorial dispute may jeopardize the effort on ocean governance if it is not been handled properly or through amicable solution by the states involved. Apart of territorial dispute, ocean resources such as fishery, oil and gas, new energy development can also become the attractive reason of conflict among the countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia is blessed in terms of geographically setting of our country. We are located in some of the very important sea lane of communication in the world, like Strait of Malacca and South China Sea, as well as the Sulu Sea and Celebes Sea. Of course, it is good to become the coastal state of this sea segment for us, but at the same time, managing this segment of oceans and sea are really challenging and at the same time interesting. Managing the situation is very important, both at the strategic level as well as the action on the ground. Try not to escalate tension or avoid any incident at the sea, and this is also part of ocean governance. Next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, NSC is the lead agency in Malaysia to implement and managing the rights, duty, liability and responsibility of Malaysia as a state party to United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS 1982. We are considered as the custodian of UNCLOS 92 in Malaysia. UNCLOS 1982, among others, has laid down some of the rules and standards on how countries perform their conduct in ocean governance. A part of UNCLOS, International Maritime Organization or IMO, based in London, is also an important organ under UN that deal with the management of ocean and maritime affairs. And in order to implement some part of this international rules and regulation, we need to harmonize it with the formulation of domestic law. NSC is also responsible to coordinate with the involvement of all related stakeholders on the issue related to national security and sovereignty. Ocean governance may involve so many related stakeholders in many cross-cutting issues. Fisheries, environment, exploitation of living and non-living resource, pipeline and submarine cable, maritime connectivity, territorial dispute, and all of this is related to multiple stakeholders, jurisdiction, and responsibility in ocean governance. This is where NSC came to fit the gap as coordinator on most of the issue, not only at the strategic level, but also at the operational and tactical levels. And not only involving the government sector, but it also commercial sector or other parties which may have interest in some issues. Issues on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, for example, is a new thing that country may need to focus and explore in future as it related to new maritime technologies and maritime capabilities, not only by the state actor, but to all parties. Within the limit of 200 nautical miles of EEZ is already a challenging task, but now the newly agreed text at the UN level is looking into the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is beyond 200 nautical miles. This is among the new challenges in ocean governance throughout the world at the moment. Therefore, the NSC uses the approach in the National Security Policy, or we call it Dasar Keselamatan Negara, DKN, 2021 to 2025, which is a document that outlines national security management in a broader, strategic, and comprehensive context to shape the direction of national security and sovereignty management. In this matter, the formation of ocean governance, which require the cooperation of all parties and involve various sensitive issues, need to be addressed through a comprehensive approach. Next. How to improve ocean governance? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, ocean governance play a major part in so many aspects, namely the world trading at sea, ocean resources, food security, environment, global warming, and etc. All of us need to equally responsible, playing our part in empowering the ocean governance. In order to achieve that goal, some approaches need to be addressed. Perhaps legal and legislation framework is one of the top priority approaches that need be put in place at international, regional, and national level by all countries. At the same time, each country must also take responsibility to enhance cooperation at bilateral, trilateral, and or multilateral approach in ocean governance. Common issue in ocean governance, for instance, environmental aspect, search and rescue, safety of navigation, can be a starting point for a better cooperation by the countries at all levels. Internally, at domestic level, better coordination approach by any lead agency bodies also need to be put in place, as we already identified the challenges in maritime affairs and ocean governance is getting more complex from time to time. On top of that, build up internal expertise in various aspects of multidisciplinary sector in ocean governance is also crucial to ensure that each issue or threat can be solved internally. And at the same time, can uphold the national integrity and sovereignty. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I have covered all scope of my presentation entitled Underpinning the Ocean Governance, the NSC Perspective. I hope I have completed my presentation within the given time. And with that, I thank you and I hand over the session to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you for attention. You covered very briefly, and it is interesting to note also about the new developments of during Q&A session. So we press on. May I now invite Professor Surki to deliver your perspective, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge Chief of the Royal Malaysia. Not my first time to Langkawi, but first time to Lima, and it's very impressive, and I'm very excited and happy to be here. My presentation today has been one where I'm very fortunate to be following the Minister and indeed the presentation that we've just heard, because it makes my life a little easier. Because in the Minister's keynote address, he made reference to some of the challenges, particularly the coordination challenges that exist between so many ministries and agencies that all have interests in ocean affairs. Next slide, please. Now, if we can click through to the end of the page, that would be wonderful. I animated these things with perhaps a little too much. Now, obviously, ocean governance is all about good order at sea. Fantastic, thank you. And this, as we've heard, involves things like safe navigation and communications, reference to submarine cables that we've just heard. Obviously, issues like search and rescue are important. Marine scientific research too, making sure that this can be undertaken and properly regulated. We also have to protect resources, and again we heard this from the Minister, and in the previous presentation we just heard. Safeguarding fisheries, ensuring petroleum resources are looked after, that infrastructure at sea is in good shape, and that the marine environment is protected. All of these are some of our objectives, and these can be relevant at a national level, but also internationally, because obviously the nature of the ocean is one that is challenging and one that is shared. The nature of ocean space, for example, is international in a way that land territory can never be. The land territory of Malaysia is within Malaysia's sovereignty, and Malaysia decides who enters its land territory and who does not. But the ocean space is a more shared space. Although parts of that ocean space are entrusted to states either under their sovereignty or to protect their resources, at the same time we need to foster international trade and communication. And that requires the space to have some aspect of sharing, which makes the management of ocean space far more complicated. So ocean governance is going to require a range of responses that are going to be necessary in order for it to be effective. We've already heard, and I'll speak more about law and policy and the importance of development of these. I'm privileged to hear the National Security Council's efforts in this regard. But also there are issues of capability, to make sure you have the assets necessary to implement policy, coordination, to make sure agencies are working together effectively, and the challenges of those are not insubstantial, and also cooperation, to make sure that you can work together with neighbours and others to ensure everything works well. So we need to make sure that there are legal frameworks in place, nationally and internationally, to assist us to do these things. And internationally, at the heart of this is the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Within ASEAN, I think everybody except for Cambodia are parties to the Law of the Sea Convention, and the Cambodians have expressed desire to ratify. So we have a template which regionally is an important one. There are also arrangements with respect to international law overseen by IMO with respect to shipping, a range of environmental matters through IMO and others, and arrangements with respect to fisheries, usually through instruments such as the UN Fish Stocks Agreement or regional fisheries management organisations coordinating activities. And then there are emerging instruments, and again we heard this briefly, the new agreement to deal with the protection of biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So what do we need? Well, we also need capability to underlie all of this. We need the assets in terms of ships on the water. Nothing beats a hull on the water to undertake maritime enforcement. Aircraft to assist in that task, and use of remote sensing. Now that could include the use of drones, but it can also include satellite data and other mechanisms. And these are increasingly important. In the fisheries space, this has wrought a sea change in the last 25 years that's dramatically improved the combating IUU fishing. You also need, though, coordination. And frankly, the Minister's keynote address couldn't have said this any better. The number of agencies and ministries that have ocean responsibilities. And Malaysia is not unique in this. In fact, the situation described by the Minister is quite a common one. There are rarely states who can say all oceans should be governed by a single ministry within their responsibility. Those responsibilities are spread. Fisheries are in one agency, petroleum is in another, law enforcement lies elsewhere, environmental protection, transportation, and the list goes on. And getting all of these agencies to work together is the current major challenge with respect to ocean governance. Figuring out how to do it is a riddle that every state needs to solve. And there is no single solution. If there were, it would be done. But each state has its own constitutional challenges, its own internal regulation that must be balanced and set with, in a way that can accommodate the international responsibilities and obligations that states also possess. So getting these multiple agencies and ministries to work together is vital and is the work that all states in this region are attempting. You also have the prospect of international cooperation. No state can deal with ocean affairs alone. The fact that Malaysia has, as we saw, multiple maritime boundaries with many neighbours, some of which are settled, others are still to be resolved, this makes cooperation a great challenge. Getting everybody around the table to work well together is very, very important. This is true at a legal level in terms of harmonising law and policy and ensuring regulation can be undertaken in a way that helps. This could be through the sharing of data or at an enforcement levels. This region is famous. Malaysia has taken a key role in the joint patrols in the Malacca Straits and more recently in the Sulu-Sulawesi Sea. And these joint patrols have been very important in suppressing illegal activity. Sharing data and working together in respect of data about ship movements within a region and so on, absolutely vital in improving responses to illegal activity. And again, port-state measures, trying to ensure that states begin to work together cooperatively to harmonise measures to tackle particularly IUU fishing, but also environmental challenges too. So to conclude, and I'm very conscious of the time, there are no easy solutions to these things. The approaches that have been tried in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Australia, all represent different approaches to how to tackle the problem of coordination. And each one has its advantages and each one represents a challenge. But at its heart, institutional collaboration is what needs to happen. Whether this is done at a ministerial or cabinet level, whether it is done through a coordinating ministry, or whether it is done through a joint agency with responsibility for enforcement and other agencies acting as a client, all of these can work and all of these can be useful. It's also important to recognise that there needs to be good communication, that each state needs to engage with its neighbours and work together, share their experiences to cooperate, because it's only through cooperation and improved coordination that we can realise the benefits that underpin effective ocean governance. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Prof, for your excellent presentation. I must agree that it is quite tough, or in terms of getting together in coordinating all these various aspects of.
Good morning, Honorable Moderator, esteemed panelists, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. A special thanks to the organizer and the Seapower Center for the invitation and accommodating today's event. It's a pleasure to be here. Most of the issues that I would like to raise has already been mentioned by two of the speakers, but I will still try to talk about some of it to help emphasize our discussion today. Now, the theme given to me is underpinning ocean governance. Now, what do we understand by underpinning here? So when we say it's a set, underpinning means it's a set of ideas, motives or device which justifies or forms the basic of something. So when we say underpinning ocean governance, we're talking about what sets the basis to build on ocean governance. Yeah. So when we talk about ocean governance, there are so many aspects of it, and I'll be focusing more on the roles of the maritime related entities. Yeah. So I'm going to start off with the Malaysian perspective because that will draw some insights to what we can look into in terms of regional and also global level. Now. Now, when we look at Malaysia, basically it's a unique maritime nation with continental roots. It's the only ASEAN member that has divided land masses in the whole of Southeast Asia. Meaning we have two different land masses here, unlike Indonesia or Philippines, which is an archipelagic state. So we have four maritime estates here, which is Straits of Malacca, the west part of South China Sea, which is divided by Natuna and also Anambas. We have the east part of South China Sea and also Sulu Sea. Now, when we talk about the threats, yeah, so we look at Straits of Malacca. We're talking about human trafficking. At the northern Andaman area, we have Burmese meth. We have the issue of Rohingyas. Indonesia, we're looking at migrants and also smuggling. If we look at the west part of Peninsula, we have illegal fishing. Johor, we have secret smuggling. The east part of South China Sea, we have the presence of various countries and a high level of militarization in that particular area, and also maritime militia. Sulu Sea, we are looking at human trafficking, kidnap for ransom, small and arms smuggling. So we have two land masses, 4 water columns, and 1 ocean policy with multitude challenges. So this is the problem that we face. Now, what are the roles of maritime-related entities? When we talk about law enforcement, is primarily taken care by MMDA, supported by the Malaysian Armed Forces or the police. When we talk about sovereignty, it's primarily by the Navy, supported by the Coast Guard. Yeah. So, and there are a lot of incidents that tells us that the role of these maritime players are intervening. Yeah. So, if you look at Ops Naga, it's a multi-agent task force operation led by MMEA, and it has proven to be roaring success. Ops Naga Barat, Ops Naga Timur, which was jointly coordinated with the police, navy, fishery, and Independence Department, has benefited the people, especially the local fishermen. When you talk about berthing party in Ali, it's a sovereignty issue, but shadowing is done by the Coast Guard. So when you talk about Straits of Malacca, as what Professor K has mentioned, we have the Malacca Straits Coordinated Patrol here. And you talk about Sulu Sea, it's primarily a crime problem. So at the end of the day, it's about intelligence collection that we need here. Yeah, and let's not forget about COVID-19 pandemic, where we had the National Task Force, supporting each other, overcoming various issues that we face. So the point is here, although they have their own core businesses, yeah, we can see how their roles can change. Based on situation, it can evolve when it comes to incidents. So this is the kind of architecture of a maritime that we have here. Now, what is the way forward? I have 3 points that I would like to raise here and open for discussion. Is that number 1, we should be focusing on asset-based operation to be complemented by information-based operation. And this can be achieved if some of the aspects are taken into consideration, such as sincerity, political will between agencies. Also, if we are successful, if we have analytical skills being improved, in terms of analyzing the trends, the hotspots, and by this we can safeguard high operational needs for more effectively. So you don't need to patrol anywhere. Basically, you can save logistics, you can save money, and you only need to go to the hotspot for responses. Number 2 is unmanned platforms for patrolling. So basically, this can to help respond to the needs of obsolescences of fleets. It can help do the human job. Because we are handling with organized crime syndicate here. So basically, they are also doing their job trying to organize the crime by seeing where the ship's going, what time and what not. So we have to be upfront. It's hard to be certain when we launch unmanned platform here. We can use QR codes, to address clonings, biometric for fishermen, to address illegal fishing, to sort of give what's happening in and out. Vessel tracking system can also help to monitor the movements. And so number 3, the last one, which is my favorite all the time, is to look at interagency cooperation. Now, it is a single point of contact is vital for assessment, collections of data, library of analysis, and for more targeted responses. Regionally, we have a lot of spokes, in Southeast Asia. We have Thai MAC, we have Brunei Maritime Coordination Center, we have Vietnam Maritime Security Information Center, Indonesia also have their Maritime Security Agency. So these are already there. So we can actually draw it out to a global level for more coordinated responses. So in conclusion, I would say, ocean governance is not a national problem. It needs a holistic approach. It requires at all levels of coordination, but it starts at home. Yeah, and it is parallel with the Industrial Revolution 5.0 towards automation. So it's important to understand that monitoring, controlling, and surveillance is playing a crucial role here. So because, as I said, we are dealing with organized crime. So I would like to end my presentation here by saying good fencings make good neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tari. It's also very interesting to note about the way forward made by Dr. Tari just now, particularly how to do the how. What would be the progressive way forward on this national maritime single point of contact. Maybe we can, discuss further on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we shall begin with the Q&A session now. I think we have a good time. May I just check with the Secretariat? Okay, all right. We have pretty much ample time to proceed with this Q&A session, just to give audience opportunity to ask more to the speakers. Before we start, just a reminder for those who like to ask a question, please state your name clearly and your affiliation, and make it short and sharp, and to whom the question is directed to. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, may I have probably the first 3 questions first, all right? You can go to the mics, or probably Secretariat, please assist us. Yes, can we have first 3 questions first?
Very interesting panel and topic today. If I can draw slightly to the regional concept, especially to the professor, how do you see the challenges that may pose to ASEAN pertaining to the subject matter, the ocean governance? Thank you very much.
ASEAN has worked hard to try to improve cooperation around maritime affairs and has had this as a focus for many years. It's difficult though, because different members have different needs and different areas of concern, and that whilst progress has been made in resolving boundary issues in the region, there are ongoing issues with respect to some maritime boundaries, and that's complicated by concerns in the South China Sea, obviously, which may make it difficult to resolve all boundary issues that might need to be resolved. obviously, the way to do this is, I think, to approach things where there is low-hanging fruit, and to address cooperation towards areas where there is commonality. ASEAN does have some common positions with respect to issues around the protection of the marine environment, and there's common concerns with respect to issues like search and rescue and safety of navigation. And these are areas where I think cooperation can focus and confidence can be built. The cooperation can progress incrementally. I think it's unrealistic to expect that all maritime issues could be the focus of simultaneous cooperation, and that to be done between the ASEAN members as well as with states from around external to the region. And so I think taking things incrementally, doing your best to find common ground, to work with others is the way to go. And I think ASEAN has approached things in that fashion, and I think it's probably the most effective way to do so. But the challenges will remain. Whilst there's uncertainty with maritime jurisdictions, states will be reluctant to commit to all forms of cooperation in all areas. And I don't see those issues disappearing anytime soon, so they'll have to be worked around. But there's goodwill and good progress to date.
Thank you. We can start from here first. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I'm Intan from Sabah National Council. So this question is for the first speaker. You mentioned the national security policy. So it has been launched in 2021. And how does it progress in implementation, and how can it add value to ocean affairs? Thanks.
On the national security policy 2021 and 2025, the progress so far. Can you answer that?
Thank you very much, Mr. May. As we know, the challenging security threat is undergoing considerable change. It is a dynamic in nature. That's why National Security Council come out with the National Security Policy, or we call it a Dasar Keselamatan Negara, which this document actually is a live document, and we will identify the new threat. That's why it's every 5 years, means 2021 and 2025. The new threat we will put it under policy, and we will manage the issue or the threat according the 9 core that we identified how we want to tackle and solve it. In this matter, the NSC sees the security threat as an interested issue, as an interrelated issue not only borne by the government, but involving the role of non-state actors. So the Dasar Keselamatan Negara itself is a comprehensive approach that can be implemented, can be used by everyone, either for the state actor or for the non-state actor. Dasar Keselamatan Negara, we have 9 pillars, such as the international relation, and we also have the how we want to unite the nation. So we use the Dasar Keselamatan Negara of National Security Policy to tackle or to handle the security issue, to ensure the maritime situation or maritime environment remain peace and safe. Currently, Malaysia government, especially in NSC, we practicing the approach from Dasar Keselamatan Negara or national security policy throughout the various platforms, like we are going to decide on the issue on South China Sea, on Strait Malacca, on Celebes Sea, and Sulu Sea. We are using the approach on Dasar Keselamatan Negara and come out with the comprehensive decision. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Hope that answer the question. Can we give her the opportunity first? All right. Please.
Testing.
Good morning to moderator and the speakers. My name is Nurul Shazza. I'm the Assistant Director.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Testing?
All right, better.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, particularly to the moderator and the speakers. My name is Nurul Shazza. I'm the Assistant Director from the Department of Maritime Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Thank you for the insightful session on the ocean governance. I do have a question in mind. When you're talking about the ocean governance, the one document that comes into my mind is the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific AOIP. And my question is to any of the speakers that can comment. What do you think the AOIP that has to be doing with the ocean governance? Will it achieve its objective, or will it have challenges, or is something that it can work out? So perhaps if there's any insights from any of the speakers, that would be deeply appreciated. Thank you.
All right, that is a question from the MOFA.
And therefore, I'm a little hesitant to say things. I'm conscious that ASEAN centrality lead should be from people within ASEAN. But look, no, I think there are challenges. And I've alluded to some of those. Obviously, getting good cooperation is going to be difficult, particularly as although ASEAN members have the view expressed within the membership, they do also have different views and different priorities, and that can make things a little difficult. But look, I think it's a reasonable template for moving forward, and I'm not sure it will be able to deal with all of the challenges, but I would hope that it would be. I think I'm very reluctant to say anything that would suggest that it's anything other than full support from my perspective.
Thank you. You want to add, Dr. Tariq, please?
We talk about the Indo-Pacific idea was mentioned by who? So that will give you a lot of answers to whether the ASEAN outlook of Indo-Pacific will be really effective at the ASEAN level. Of course, when you look at the document, the outlook tells us that it looks as very general issues, which is quite similar to what all of us have been talking all these years. Yeah, it's just a construct that brings in the focus of Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and that's about it. I think at the end of the day, it's an outlook, and it's inclusive of all countries, not excluding any states. That's something that we need to think about, and that's going to be a challenge for us. Because at the end of the day, if you go back to the fundamentals of ASEAN establishment, what is it for? Yeah, so that will give us a lot of answers. That it's another platform to look into issues and to respond to evolving, changing environment of Southeast Asia. But whether it's going to bring forward to anything that is more drastic, in my opinion, there is nothing much that I can see. It's just an outlook to respond to the evolving issues, which is the Indo-Pacific construct. So that's my take. Thank you.
Okay, for my opinion, for countries, and as we know that for the maritime affairs, we have the body to manage it, which is the International Maritime Ocean, and of course, each country they have their own legal or law that they want to practice. So in this case, there will have a challenge for each. To ensure the IOP to be happen. So it takes time. And I'm sure there's one body to harmonize with the formulation, because we need to formulate between the domestic regulation on law because it's a requirement for each country. At the same time, IMO as the body to manage the maritime affair. Thank you.
Right, thank you to all the speakers. Can we move on?
I am Acting Sublieutenant Yusnia from Malaysia Coast Guard. I have one question. Talking about the way forward suggested from Dr. Terry just now. How do you see the unmanned platform is safe and secure for the nation? Thank you.
All right, Dr. Tari.
Thank you. I expected this question because even yesterday when I was attending the Maritime Conference, there were a lot of concern in terms of how do we handle this cyber aspect of security. So everybody can hack. People are getting smarter. The more organized we become, they become more organized than us. Yeah. There's no straight answer to it. Of course, the risk is definitely going to be there. But in my opinion, when I thought about unmanned platform, what came to my mind is that, as I mentioned, is asset-based operation complemented with the assistance of humans as well. So when I talk about automation and things about technology, it is not purely leaving the job to this platform to do the job. It still needs a human factor in it. Yeah, because it goes by logic and not reason. Yeah, so that's my take on it. So when there's anything that that disturbs the system, so we have humans to respond to the issue. So this is where all those armed forces and Coast Guard, anything that is related, any entities that is related to maritime will need to be well learned, well read about all these aspects. So you are still there and ready need to do the job, but that something happens, you still have someone to fall back, which is the human factor. So we can't just let the unmanned platform to just do everything because, as I said, organized crime, they are so organized. They are really updated with what's happening around us. So that's my opinion. So there's some kind of redundancy there, but it's a good part, good redundancy. Thank you.
So my question I want to ask to Professor Khairil. Khairil? Okay, sorry. Okay. We can see so many dots in Malaysian water, especially in Johor area. So refer to piracy map. Okay. Maybe the interpretation or definition of piracy itself is still confused. Not so many people understand the difference between terminology of piracy or sea robbery or just petty theft. I spent my time about 3 years in Johor, and so far only one robbery case in Johor reported, and we successfully arrest them. But the rest is just a petty theft. So I want to request from you, Prof, to explain again about the definition of piracy, sea robbery or petty theft. Thank you.
Well, piracy in international law is that everyone has jurisdiction, it's universal. So as long as you encounter a vessel that is not in somebody's territorial sea, any state has jurisdiction to deal with it. But because that's a very generous formulation, the definition is quite restricted. It has its origins in a study that was done at Harvard University in the 1930s, such as the age of it. To qualify for piracy, you need several elements. It can't be in an area under sovereignty, so it mustn't be in the territorial sea. The definition in the law of the sea refers to the high seas, but by virtue of Article 58 of the Convention, it also can include the exclusive economic zone. There must be 2 ships, one with the pirates, one that is being attacked, and there must be what is described as violence or depredation, which means the pirates must come on and threaten or be violent in some way or do damage. And then there also needs to be a motivation for the pirates. And this is the most controversial element, because the Law of the Sea Convention refers to the violence and depredation being undertaken for private ends. Now this has been interpreted conservatively by some to mean that the pirates have to be after money, that they want to get rich, they want to profit from their endeavours. Whether this could include people who are motivated to raise money for a political cause. Some of the attacks, for example, in the Sulu-Sulawesi Sea have been undertaken by people who are likely raising money to pursue their their own political agenda in the southern Philippines. Whether you view those as pirates or not, well, it depends what's going on in their head. Did they want the money for themselves? Did they want it for their cause and so on? This issue is probably responsible for the creation of the Sewer Convention, the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against Maritime Navigation, to remove that element of that private end. But different states have different views on what that might encompass. And this leads to untidiness. And it's also not helped by the fact that the term pirate and piracy has been in common use in many jurisdictions, and the people understand it to mean one thing, and that doesn't necessarily fit with their legal definition of it. But the legal definition ultimately is what gives you universal jurisdiction, so it will remain significant. And the Sewer Convention is a way to ensure that you can try to get around the problem. But I agree, sir, it is complex, because I've read translations of different states' legislation. Indonesia, for example, used to refer to something called river piracy, which manifestly can't be piracy in international law because it's in waters that are completely under Indonesian sovereignty. That's not to suggest that there's anything wrong with criminalising activities on a river, but it clearly falls outside of international law. And it highlights the uncertainty that you've described. But the definitional elements that I've given you at the beginning are what's at the heart of what will give you universal jurisdiction at international law, and wouldn't be disputed by other states if applied in that way.
Right, thank you. Another question from
National Resilience College. My question is actually revolved around National Task Force that previously we have National Task Force previously, but since it's been dissolved after we successfully curbed the illegal immigrants issue during the pandemic. For the NSC so-called panelists, Doctor, how does the NSC see, in the pretext of economy of effort, we could so-called adopt or adapt the same framework to address the issue of ocean governance? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, National Task Force actually is formed during the pandemic era, because during the pandemic we see the threat challenge, especially the illegal immigrants from our neighboring country, will affect the health condition in Malaysia. But at the same time, we see that we saw that the security threat at the maritime, and at that particular time, government decided to form the National Task Force, and we can see a lot of achievement contributed by the NTF. But since we have a national security policy, okay, we see that the cooperation among agencies, okay, we can use the cooperation to ensure the same modus operandi can be implemented, same like the National Task Force. This the top management of the government decision, and NSC, we can use the national security policy to ensure that the same modus operandi for the NTF can be implemented at this particular time. So far,
during the COVID in regards to National Task Force, and I find it, in my opinion, I really feel it was really a success story for Malaysia. So it's not that we cannot do it, we can. There was a push during the COVID because of the threat that we face with the pirates, people coming in, and we had to entertain a lot of issues during that time. I'm not sure what was the reason for it to be removed, but I think if it's not National Task Force, I believe another model which is similar to NTF should be considered, to build, because we are talking about several agencies that are overlapping in terms of their roles and functions. When I say overlapping, means that it's not that we are doing a job of another person and you are doing mine. It's not that. It's just that when it comes to collaboration. See, so that is the issue. So we have a lot of agencies that they have different sets of laws, yeah, way of doing, work culture, right, mentality, and so many things that's going on, urban organization structure. So if we can bring all this, and NTL was a proof that it could be done. So if we can put that into a different framework, I think we can go far. Because this should be given a priority in Malaysia because we are a maritime nation. Although with continental roots, we are still surrounded by waters, like it or not. So I think it's really important, and I find it very useful. Thank you.
Two more questions, please. Yeah. First, Admiral Jamal.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. First, Admiral Jamal from the Royal Malaysian Navy, currently undergoing course in NRC. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation by the panelists. My question will be on the, I would much interested on the way forward mentioned by the speaker, Dr. Tari. Maybe half of it have been answered from the previous question, but to me, there is a lot of things still to be done on the way forward on the interagency cooperations. Most of the distinguished guests in this hall is from the agency. So there's still a lot of hurdles in managing interagency cooperation to successfully managing the ocean governance with the one single ministry. We would like to have basically in few years to come, maybe in 2 years, solid KPI under one framework of the interagency corporations. That to me is most priority. We would like maybe Dr. Tari can explain the outside bulk of the way forward of the interagency corporations, if not in detail, but basically the mechanism that can work for us. Thank you.
Very lengthy comment there in terms of interagency coordination, but pretty much what's the way forward do you think in your opinions, apart from what you have said just now about NTF, etc.
Well, thanks for the question. And if you ask me for an answer, it's quite tough for me to say. I can come up with wonderful ideas. That's what academics do. We read and we just write and we give opinion. But I've been doing it for some time, and I've visited and I've talked to a few friends around. For me, one of the things that we need to look into perhaps is the cultural differences that we have. That's number one, because the Navy is different, the Coast Guard is different. We can go on and on, right? So the culture is different. And being from a defense university, I know I meet a lot of you, and I know different thinking, different approach of way to do things. I think if we can keep all our differences aside and think about how do we merge some commonalities that we have, I think that could be one of those ways. But it will require a lot of talking, discussion, taking it, loosening it up, just for the purpose of the benefit of the threats that we are facing. I think, I don't want to talk about budget, but we need money as well, because every ministries will have their own budget and their own constraints and all that. But I think that's also one of those way forward in terms of getting the funding that is required. More focus need to be given to sort of look into the importance of the waters around us. What else that I can think of? I think for me that's one of the cultural differences that I see. It's one of those issues that we can overcome. There's so many things that I can say, but I don't have a straight answer. But from NTF, when it happened, I felt that honestly it worked. Of course, we have our issues within, but it still worked. So there was a push because of COVID, and now because everything is settled, we tend to think it's okay, right? That sort of thing. But I think that shouldn't be the attitude. We should keep on driving ourselves to, move forward. So I think that's my take. I'm not sure that I've managed to provide you some way forward, but I hope I've done some justice to the question. Thank you, sir.
Obviously, we need a central body kind of thing to become a referee. Okay, can we have one more last question? Sorry, one more last question. Yes, please.
Okay, hi, my name is Jesslyn. I'm from the Maritime Institute of Malaysia. My question is very precise. It's actually on how do we uphold international ocean governance when there are challenges like overlapping territorial and boundary claims and also different interpretations of UNCLOS. I think the 2016 Arbitration Award is a clear example of how challenging it is to uphold international ocean governance, and I would like to know your viewpoints on this. Thank you.
I think this is obviously is your forte, Prof. Talking about the international governance and I think you mentioned about the PCA just now, Permanent Court of Arbitration. Please.
Look, this is a perennial challenge that the negotiation of the Law of the Sea Convention required compromise and even what could be described as creative ambiguity, where there was no common position on an issue. Terms were left sufficiently vague to accommodate various positions. And we're reaping that approach today because there are different views on the interpretation of the Convention. I am hopeful, though, that over time these matters are addressed. The progress of international litigation helps bring greater precision to elements. The South China Sea arbitration is one example of that, but by no means the only one. The decision last year in a case between Nicaragua and Colombia dealing with maritime issues in the Caribbean, I think is a very significant case in terms of interpretation. So things will improve. As well, states tend to cluster around common positions. When the convention was opened for signature in 1982, there were 33 states that asserted territorial seas that were more than 12 nautical miles wide, which is manifestly inconsistent with the Convention. Today there is one, and that one is promised that it will change and it will reduce its territorial sea to 12 nautical miles. Now that's taken 40 years to get to that point, but it does suggest that commonality can be found, even if it isn't something we can accomplish instantaneously. Now, noting the number of uniformed personnel in the room, I can appreciate that that's very frustrating. Operators want to know what the law is, so they know what they can do and what they can't do. And it is nothing worse than a lawyer turning up saying, well, there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. But international law is hard, and getting 200 odd states together and finding commonality of position is extremely difficult. And the fact that we've made as much progress as we have should give us heart, and then over time I think more and more commonality will emerge. And I think the Law of the Sea Convention is proving reasonably robust, even in the face of challenges of this nature. But your point is well made. It is a difficult task.
Thank you, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the three panelists have shared their views on the theme of our discussion today. Just like very quickly to highlight some of the key takeaways that you can safely deduce from this session would be, firstly, I think the need for a national ocean policy and action plan, more importantly. We talked about the action plan, what is reflected in the NSP in governing the ocean across all sectors. Hence, we need to walk the talk to support the NSP 2021-2025. Secondly, the need to establish a proper entity in coordinating these maritime affairs prudently. Yes, we have got a good maritime NTF, like Dr. Tari mentioned just now. So probably that framework should, be used as a stepping stone. And of course, it requires to be cascaded down for greater coordination and collaboration among interagencies, especially at operational level. And thirdly and lastly, it's also vital to mention on the WOCOS concept, which none of the speakers mentioned, but I like to highlight here about the whole of government and whole of society approach in regards to community-based management. The rules, I think, the rules of the maritime communities and other stakeholders should also be further strengthened in regards of this topic of the day, ocean governance. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have come to the end of this session. I'd like to thank our panelists for their great sharing and contribution. Please give them a big round of applause. And also thank you to everybody for participating. And I now pass to MC. Please.
Thank you very much once again, our moderator. And looks like we have come to the end of our first session for today. So with that, I would like to invite our moderator, our speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for a short coffee break outside the ballroom. And we'll give about 20 to 30 minutes break, and we'll be back in the hall room later for the second session. With that, thank you very much for participating with us, and we'll see you shortly for the second session. Terima kasih.